Bruchim Abayim, Morai Rabotai, to another weekly shiur on Hilchot Shabbat Be'iyun, and we are doing Siman Shin Yutet, Hilchot Borer, and starting today Sif Dalet, which, if you're looking at the Shulchan Aruch, it would seem pretty simple: one line, half a line of Shulchan Aruch, 2 lines of Rema, and that would basically be it. But this becomes surprisingly one of the most important of the Seifim in Siman Shin Yutet of Hilchot Borer in general, because of things that it involves. Maran writes, and this comes straight from Rambam in Perek Chet of Hilchot Shabbat, Haborer psolet mitoch ochel. This is something that we have mentioned before already, that you need 3 conditions for borer to be mutar. One is it has to be psolet. The first and foremost, it has to be ochel mitoch psolet, not psolet mitoch ha'ochel. It has to be choosing good from the mixture, not bad from the mixture. And what happens, says Maran, if you choose bad from the mixture? Haborer psolet mitoch ochel. What would happen even if you do it beyad, afilu beyado ahad, even with one hand? Afilu, Maran says, you're chayav, you are already transgressing a isur doraita. And even, says the Mishnah Berurah over here, even if you are doing it la'altar, even if you're using it for immediate usage. Ve'afilu ha'ochel merubeh, and says the Rama, even if the good is the majority of the mixture, ve'yesh yoter torach bebrirat ha'ochel, afilu hachi lo yibror ha'psolet, afilu kidei le'echol la'altar. Even if you have majority good in the mixture, and it's much harder to take the good from the bad because the good is the majority, still it would be asur to take the bad from the good. The reason that the Ramah has to write this is because there are shitos, legitimate shitos in the Rishonim, that they hold that if the good is the majority, you will take the bad, which it makes your life much easier. We do not paskin like that. Not only we don't paskin like that, is a chiyuv doraita, according to those who is not. Now, the interesting part of this, in parentheses, is what the Be'er Etev writes over here immediately. Ube Yom Tov, the halacha in Yom Tov would be different. Now, if you have Shabbat and Yom Tov, Shabbat overrides. But on a Yom Tov alone, says the Be'er Hetev, Ube Yom Tov mekilinan de'em berera be'Yom Tov. And he brings that therefore, when you have a Yom Tov and you want to do brera of a mixture that the majority is good, says the Be'er Hetev, we will let you do the psolet mitoch ha'ochel, which is a different halakha, just in parentheses. Now, the reason it's such a big deal that the Ramah has to mention this is because the Tur, for instance, those shitas that we just mentioned, that they are more lenient, one of them is Rabbeinu Baal HaTurim. The Tur writes in our Simana, I'll just paraphrase some of it and read it quickly because it's a longer thing, which really involves Sif Vav and later parts of our Siman as well. The Tur writes, V'ketzad hu borer. How do you do the choosing in your borer process of psolet and ochel? Im yesh torach beberirat ha'ochel yoter miberirat ha'psolet. If it's harder to take the ochel from the psolet, and oftentimes that's just because it's the majority, right? But it could be other reasons as well. But for whatever reason, if it's harder to take the ochel from the psolet, says the Tur, then borer kedarko lizrok ha'psolet. You do what people would do, lizrok ha'psolet, right? So that's why we have to focus on the shita of Rambam to say if you do that, there is a very warm place that a person may end up in, right? So that's Maran's psak. that even though that it may be harder, even though that we recognize that there are shitot of the Rishonim like that, still, if you take psolet mitoch ha'ochel, even though that you're doing it with one hand, even though that you're doing it the altar, and even though that it's the majority and it's harder to do the ochel mitoch psolet, still if you did psolet from ochel, the bad from the good, you're chayav. It's isur doraita. Now, the reason that Maran says biyado achat over here, if you quickly take a look at the Mishnah Berurah, the Chafetz Chaim writes, even though that later on in Seif Zayin we differentiate by the isur of nipuach napeach biyado achad mutar, that's because over there it's not the derech berera. But here, in a regular choosing, even if you are a righty and you're doing it with the left or vice versa, that's not considered shinui, right? That's not considered any change. The Chayei Adam proves from Chayei Adam was one of the Gdolei Achronim. Still, if you take a look at Chayei Adam, looks like a sefer of Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. Until you actually are learning the Sugya Be'iyun, and you take a look at the Nishmat Adam, right? And Chochmat Adam and Chayei Adam looks like a Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. It tells you bullet point halachot. But when you look at the Biurim on the bottom, right? So you realize the tremendous Gaon and Lamdan that he was the Mechutan of the Vilna Gaon, actually. There were children married, and if you take a look, in Chayei Adam, you have a lot of occasions in which he disagrees with the Gaon. Even though that he knew the Gaon, he felt that, that's Kachi Darka Shel Torah. He got a lot of heat for that, and therefore, from people, and therefore he took out all of the arguments that he had from Chochmat Adam. You go through Chochmat Adam, you don't see him argue with, publish any of his arguments with the Gaon. Actually, the truth is, if you take a look at the very first edition of Chochmat Adam, in the Hakdama, he writes his frustration with the people. He says, the Torah is given to be expressed if you are, of course, in that level, to feel that you have what to offer to the world of Torah. And he basically mentions that because of the heat that he got from people, he's not going to print any of that. It says that Torah that's going to be now prevented from the world will be on the shoulder of those people. Well, they took this out. In the new Chochmat Adams, you don't see the whole Hakdama is not there really. So hence, go and find one of the first editions of Chochmat Adam and see what you find. But nevertheless, he's just to tell you who the Chayei Adam. So he brings a raya from the Tosefta. Brings a raya from Tosefta that proves that aside from writing, and this is the Mishnah Berurah brings this in Siman Shin Mem later on as well. That aside from writing, that if you do it with the other hand, you are patur midoraita. All the other melachot, if you do it with the left hand, with the right hand, that's not considered klei acharya. That's not considered a shinui, right? So therefore, even if you say b'yad achad b'shtei yadayim, it's not considered. That's why Maran writes that even a yad achad, even if you're doing it with one hand, and if you do it with the hand that you don't usually do it, that's still going to be chayav. So I did it with my left hand, the borer. Easy way out. The right. No, it still will be chayav because that's not considered sufficient shinui. Okay. Now, if you do it with your leg and with your mouth, and that's a little different, right? The begufo, or with mouth and feet and so on. Those are those are different stories. It's not for now. That's for a different sugya. Now, let's just finish up the Mishnah Berurah. And there are those who don't even have in the text of Shulchan Aruch the word achat. So beyado. And the chidush is, even though that ochel mitoch pesolet, if you do it beyado, that would be fine. Over here, even though that you're not using a vessel, you're not using a kli hamiyuchad lekach, still would be asur d'oraita. Fine. V'yesh yoter, and the fact that you have more ochel than psolet, רוצה לומר ביום טוב, בחי גבנה צריך לברור הפסולת, as we mentioned, on Yom Tov, in such given case that you have a mixture with majority ochel and just a few psolet, you are supposed to take the psolet from ochel, because on Yom Tov, what we mind more is minimizing the tircha. Minimizing the tircha, because we don't be paskin that en ber Rabbi Yom Tov meikaratin, and therefore we go after tircha, not after the halachot of Shabbat, because en ber Rabbi Yom Tov meikaratin in that way, as we mentioned in the beginning. So therefore, kamash malan deshani hatam de mishum simchat Yom Tov over there, because of simchat Yom Tov, and you want to minimize the tircha and the hard work that you have, therefore it will be reverse. But on Shabbat, don't you think of taking the psolet from ochel, even if taking psolet from ochel is way easier. Still will be a isur d'oraita. Fine.
We have a question. Are you allowed to move the psolet? Let's say you have a bunch of Legos and you're looking for a piece. Can you just move a bunch to the side to see if the new Lego piece is that considered taking it because you're moving a bunch?
Again, if you indiscriminately taking a bunch off, it could be a lot of ochel over there as well, right? So you're not doing necessarily much. But again, as I said before, one of the things that makes these hashlachot masio, these examples of a real life examples, easier is what Rav Moshe Feinstein writes, that you just throw it on a table, on a bed, on a floor, in a way that there's no ta'arovet anymore. Every one of them is sitting by itself. Then you choose what you need to choose, and then you put everything else back in their bin, or in their box, or in their drawer. That makes everything much easier. It takes care of a lot of these scenarios. Now, today we're going to speak about probably one of the main issues that are there, discussed and debated, perhaps even in the Rishonim, but certainly in the Achronim. Chafetz Chaim clears a chakira. He asks a question of how do you look at the Isur of Borer. And this is what I'm going to be reading and skipping around within the very large two biur halachas that we have. This seif has a lot of major biur halachas. And the first one in the seif is Dibur HaMatchil HaBorer Pesolet. If you take a look, in the second line he says, V'ishtapek im shem borer munach davka k'shborer mikodem umechin le'echol altar. The Biur Halacha questions the very nature of borer. Like this. If I'm eating, I have a piece of chicken, a piece of fish, and I want to eat. I'm not busy separating things. I'm eating. That's the verb. That's the verbiage of what happens right now. So if I take the bone out, like literally take the bone out and eat it, literally in the process of eating, is that called borer? Or maybe that's not called borer. Maybe that's called eating. And if that's called eating, then it does not belong, that scenario, in Siman Shin Yutet. It will be completely mutar, which means I could take the bone with my hand and literally pull it out and put it aside and eat the food, which is what seems in Shulchan Aruch to be a recipe for a very warm place. You're mamash borer pesolet michtoch ha'ochel, and you're still completely mutar, not even isur d'Rabbanan, because that's not borer, that's eating. Is that the pshat? Or do we say that we don't differentiate between that? That also will be asur. That's the chakira that the Chafetz Chaim asks and clears over here. So says the Chafetz Chaim, and it's important to realize that this has a lot of halachic things. You're having a watermelon, you're having fish, which is very hard to have with the bones to try to eat the bones, and then spit them. It's got to be, not every fish is boneless or only the large bones. Some of them have very small ones inside, and it's hard to put in your mouth and try to, fill with it until you get it out. So it's a very chashuve kula if it's like that. So it says I looked into this. Umatzati besefer Birkei Yosef. Maran Chida in Birkei Yosef brings this very question. And Maran Chida says, well, this is the machloket between Ma'ari Abu Lafya and Maharit Sahalon, Rabbi Yom Tov Sahalon, aka Maharitz. So this is a machloket between Ma'ari Abu Lafya and Maharitatz.
Are those Rishonim?
That is Acharonim. These are Acharonim. Gedolei Acharonim, but Acharonim. Now, Ma'ari Abu Lafya is Mekel. He holds that there is no problem whatsoever because this is a process of eating and it's not borer. Have a nice day. And Rabbi Yom Tov Sahalon, Maharitz, or Maharitas, he holds that this is no different from any other scenario of borer, and therefore it's absolutely asur, and we're talking about the chiyuv d'oraita. Right?
You're talking specifically about the chicken example, right? Chicken and bone.
Yeah, imagine you're pulling the chicken bone out and you want to eat it, but you're eating it right now. Or bones from fish.
What about the tea bag and the tea?
We're not talking about that now, right? We're not talking about that now, because we'll get to that gets much more sophisticated because it's not this. You have the bag, but all those things. You have a melon. You want to take the things out, literally take the seeds out of the watermelon and eat it. Right? You're not even shaking it off. You're literally taking the watermelon seeds and out in order to be able to eat it. Taking the bone out of the chicken, the fish.
Sesame seeds on the bagel?
Right. Not too fast. We'll ask that question maybe at the end of this Pura Halacha. But these are things that are, to tell you why it's different, these are things that are created like this. The melon is created like this. The fish is created like this. Right? The chicken is like that. These are natural things. Now, according to Mahari Abu Lafya, it would be the same case. But you'll see that the way the sugya develops, not necessarily. So that's why I don't want you to equate that in your mind. So it says, Rabbeinu Chafetz Chaim, I found in Maran Chida. Maran Chida writes that this is machloket achronim. Now, there are many gedolei achronim that beta'ut, mistakenly, including Kaf HaChaim, alav shalom, that they write mistakenly that Maran Chida is Mekel. It's not true. If you take a look at the Birkei Yosef, Maran Chida actually is Machmir. Right? In this machloket that he brings, Maran Chida does not take the side of Ma'ari Abu Lafya. Right? And for those of you who may not know, these are all Sfaradi Achronim. The fact that it makes in the Mishnah Berurah does not make them Ashkenazim. Right? These are all, you ask a regular yeshiva bacher, they don't know Ma'aritz, they think it was one of the Gedolei Brisk or Europe. These are all Sfaradi Achronim. Abu Lafya is a massive lineage of Gedolei Chachamim. And Ma'aritz Alon, the Chazon Ish, he felt that it was one of the greatest names in the list of the poskim, so, Maran Chazon Ish. So, be that as it may, the Chafetz Chaim says that Ma'ari Mekel Ma'aritas Oter. Umitham ze oser lashlich hasvuv min hakos. If you have a bug that fell into your cup, you want to take it out, right? Mutar or asur. Right, so we have to talk about this. So he says, "Is asur unless you take some of the good with it. You just tilt the cup, right? in a situation that the bug is by the end, and you just pour a little of the juice or the water, the tea, whatever it is, also with it, and that would be mutar. Or you take a spoon and you take it with some mashke, and that would be fine. Vehitir rak mitam achir. Okay. V'ayin lekaman bebe'ur halacha. It says, take a look later on in Biur Halacha that we're going to discuss this. We're also going to talk about this in just a moment. But the psak of the Birkei Yosef, as the Biur Halacha says, Vekatav ha-Birkei Yosef. Maran Chida's psak at the end of this discussion is the mistimat ha-poskim. That from the fact that the poskim do not differentiate, in old generations in Klal Yisrael, people ate food, and the food included fish and bones and all those things that people dealt with, melons and watermelons, and nobody makes this differentiation. So says Maran Chida, everybody that goes methodically through this siman and writes about it from the Gedolei HaPoskim and does not write this, is indicating that there is no real difference. So hence, Maran Chida is Machmir. He paskins like Maharitz or Maharitat, that he is stringent and not like Mahari Abulafia. Mashma de psolet mitoch ochel afilu bofen ze chayav. That even in this scenario, still will be a chiyuv. Then, Maran Chida psak is finished, and here now the Mishnah Berurah says, well, I worked on this sugya, ubinoti basfarim, umatzati sha'arishonim pligi be'yisur zeh. I looked into Sfarim and I realized that this is a machloket rishonim. Now, for an onset of this, I'll say that Harav Ovadia in two of his Sfarim, in Kol Sinai and Yabia Omer, each one of them disagrees with one of the things that Mishnah Berurah is going to say here. So he basically says it's not really muchach, it's not really a black and white reality that the proofs of the Mishnah Berurah from the Ramban and the Rosh that he's going to bring here is going to be really a solid, airtight proof, because you could understand each one of them in a different way. But the Chafetz Chaim holds that the Machloket Achronim of Maharitz and Mahari Abulafia is really Machloket Ramban / Ritba and others versus Rosh. That Ramban is Mekel, and Ritva also, and those others as well, and the Rosh, Rabbeinu Asher, is Machmir. How so? Well, not sure if it's kedai to go through all the details of this right now, given the consideration for time, but he writes basically, from the Ramban is clear, like Mahari Abulafia, because Ramban writes on Likutei Chidushim of the Ramban on Masechet Shabbat Daf Ayin Dalet. He says like this: Misvara kasav Rabbanan she'en derech berira bekach ela ke'ochel umatza psolet bechaticha she'u ochel. It's like a person that's eating something and you find a psolet inside what you're eating. What do? Says Ramban. Umafrish psolet mitoch ha'ochel. Take the psolet out and you eat it. So says Chafetz Chaim, Chazak u'baruch. I found a Beferish Ramban that says like Mahari Abulafia. Says Harav Ovadia in his Sefer Kol Sinai. Says not necessarily, not too fast. Why? Because there is
It's already in his mouth. He's saying.
No. He says Ramban says that you take it out before you eat it. You take it out and you eat it.
Maybe that's talking about something that's...
Well, let's just give a second. Says Harav Ovadia, well, there is a serious shita in the Rishonim, talking about the Aruch, the Rashba, the Gedolei, that they hold if you have one thing that's created together, right? That's what I mentioned before. If you have one thing, a watermelon is created like that. Fish is created like that. Right? Things that are one piece. That, there's no borer. So Tmara, you have a date, you want to take the pit out. It's great like that. It's not borer, right? Of course, when you're eating it, right? It's not borer because one piece is not really considered. Well, according to them, even if you're not eating it right now, it's not considered bichlal a mix. It's one thing. It's one thing. It's not a mixture of different things. This is one item.
Who's saying that? Sorry.
Many gedolei harishonim. We'll get to it in just a moment, right? So Harav says, because the Ramban could be just subscribing to that shita, therefore you cannot bring a proof that the Ramban holds that if you have a mixture of a bunch of things, and then you're eating them right now, I'm eating salad, and as I eat, I just take the onions out. No. Who says Ramban holds like that? Maybe Ramban only is talking about a case in which you have one item. Right? So therefore, he disagrees with this hochacha of the Mishnah Berurah. But nevertheless, Omnam midivrei harosh b'tshuva, I'm skipping a few lines, and Shcharuch in Siftet Zayin, also Paskins, brings this Rosh. He holds like a Maharitat that there's no heter if you have water and that there are worms in the water, right? You have water with worms in it. It's like in New York City, the regular tap water is full of worms, full of creatures. That's not small creatures, whitish creatures. You can see them if you know what you're looking for. And that's just how it is. The city knows about it. They feel it's very healthy to have that because of, seriously, they don't want to get rid of it because of their good health reasons, of other things, right? But meanwhile, the Jews are scratching their head. And over a few years it comes up. As soon as mutar, you go to a regular from home in New York, they have all kinds of sifters under tap water. If they're drinking that, or if they're washing dishes that could end up in your mouth, many of them are machmir, some of them are mekel, right? That's mutar. Not every worm is asur to eat, right? But imagine you have something that's asur to eat, and you want to eat it. Says the Rosh, you have to put a sifter, like a cloth, on top of this cup, right? That sifts, holds back the worms, and then you could drink it, right? That's what the Rosh says. Chafetz Chaim, why do you have to do it like this? Why can't you just separate them and have it? I'm drinking. So you see from the Rosh that he does not differentiate. Says Harav and Yabiyomer, no, because there you're using a kli, and kli, many differentiate between a kli and a non-kli. Here we're not talking about doing it with a kli. We're talking about doing it with the hand. So therefore, in both of those, Harav says, well, not so fast. But nevertheless, for sure is machloket achronim, because it brings it from Maritat and Mari Abulafia, and we have the machloket of machmirim and mekilim, right? Now, what is?
Is that because you're doing it with your mouth? Is that the difference? That's what
What's that?
The Mishnah Berurah differentiating because you're doing it with your mouth. It's not.
That's what the Chafetz Chaim wants to say from the Rosh. That you see, he does not allow you to separate them. It has to be in a way that you're just sipping from this mixture, and that's the only way that's mutar. Why can't you just separate it? Right? Take the sifter, just pour the whole thing in a different cup, and then drink like a mensch.
How can you even use a sifter?
What's that?
How can you even use a sifter?
Well, if it's derech achila, it's fine. It's not. You're not using a sifter. It's just, was blocking you sipping from something. It's not using a sifter. It's going straight. And that's exactly what Harav says. He says, well, don't bring a proof that he's machmir like a mahari tats, because maybe the Rosh would be mekel actually in our case, but over there he's machmir because you're using a sifter. And I could not have just poured the whole thing inside the different kli, sifting everything and then drinking the water in a second stage.
How is it that you can use derech achila to justify this, but you can't use the same two words to justify eating chicken like they've eaten chicken since day one, by taking out the bones. It's derech achila.
You're Georgian, eat the bone.
Say that again.
Derech achila, you say if you go like this is how you drink. So the way people eat is you have chicken, you take the bones out as you're eating it.
That's not because derech achila. No one puts a sifter and drinks. What I mean by that is you're not doing an act of separation. You're just sipping water. It's not, you have a blockage there that they don't come out. You're not pouring anything anywhere. You're just sipping from it. That would be equivalent of having a bone with the meat on it and eating the thing. It's not even that. It's worse than that. But that would be it. It's not pulling out the bone or anything else. It's very different, right? Now,
Passive action. He's asking, well, you put the sifter on top of it. You did something.
You put the sifter on there
Yeah, I don't
with the
think
intention of sifting.
and therefore,
So that's
You
as poor
implemented
as it
something
gets.
in order to do exactly.
no, you're not sifting. You're just you're not sifting. Sifting would be I put this here, I have a different cup, and I'm pouring it in. That would be sifting. Or I put the better would be I put the sifter on the empty cup and pour the mixture on it. That would be sifting. Here I am blocking garbage to come to my mouth. And I'm not touching the mix. I'm not touching the mixture inside of here. If I want to sip a little water from this, and I want to block certain things off, right? So the mixture stays here.
that's why it's mutar to use a filter on Shabbos? Or no, it's not?
No, please, let's stick to our things for now, okay?
But the Chafetz Chaim, his whole
You want like the whole Hilchot Borer in 1 second. You gotta wait, right?
he's arguing if derech achila is a heter at all for separating, isn't he? Isn't that what he's discussing right now? Is there a concept of derech achila when it comes to borer?
You're taking
I mean, he's trying to determine right now, can you separate if it's derech achila to separate?
Correct. So you're defending the Chafetz Chaim's proof
No,
from the
I'm-
Rosh. That's what you're trying to do.
I'm just trying to say his whole point right now is to see, is derech achila a
Correct,
reason
but
why you
again, but again, you could understand that it could be a little different when you're using a kli.
But
So-
if the Rosh indeed said meaning if your water always had bugs in it, and the way to drink it was to separate first.
No,
and
water
then-
doesn't always have.
No, I'm
bugs
saying,
in it.
let's say you lived in New York City. So the way everyone drinks their water there is by separating first and then drinking it. So derech achila is to first filter your water and then drink it.
creative work, not avodah.
Meaning in that scenario, you would even be able to separate it and drink it if derech achila was a reason to permit doing borer.
Not necessarily, because that gets into whether or not the bugs are part of the water or not. Right?
If they're not, if it's a mixture at all, you're saying?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so if you say they're part, but which are not pashtut, right? So this is, you take it up with Chacham Ovadia and Rabbi Yomer if you want to, but I'm just telling you the Chafetz Chaim holds that this is really a machloket rishonim. There are those who disagree with that assertion of Chafetz Chaim. But be that as it may, now we mentioned that in the time that you're eating, while you're busy eating, you could take them out according to some shitas, and then eat it afterwards. That's going to be shad achila heter based on the Mahari Abulafia and those who support it. Now,
Harav was Mako or Machmir? Harav
so Harav is machmir in general for that, but he does allow this because, as we will see, there are multiple snifim lahakil, right? Multiple snifim lahakil. In other words, we have a lot of rishonim that hold that even psolet mitoch ha'ochel is mutar if you're doing it la'altar, if you're doing it immediately before, right? It's mutar, and there are those who hold that if you, for instance, especially if you shake it off, right? We mentioned before, right, in 2-3 shiurim before, that what stays in your hand is ochel, and the other one is psolet. So if you shake off, let's say the seeds, then what you separated is the ochel from the psolet, and that's another heter, and the fact that they grew together is another heter. So for Harav is matir doing this, b'sach hakol. B'sach hakol, Harav says that you cannot be machmir necessarily on someone that wants to do it. It's a legitimate heter that has many snifim lahakel. Again, as we'll see, the Mishnah Berurah will be less comfortable with this. But Harav, the Rabbi Shaul, Mazuz, they're all more lenient on this specific case. But now let's take a look. This we said, this is derech achila. The Biur Halacha said this is considered derech achila in the beginning, before he brings even the B'kei Yosef, when he questions this, and on that he's really relying on what he says later on in Mishnah Berurah as well. In Siman Shin Chaf Aleph, he brings this in the name of Pri Megadim, that you could take the when you have, let's say, dates or any of the fruits that have one pit inside, right? He gives the example of shizifim. If you want to take it out, is that considered, as you eat it, is that considered borer or is not considered borer, right? So he says, the Pri Megadim, that once you're doing it mamash b'shat achila, that's not necessarily considered borer. Now, Ben Ish Chai writes the heter for that being that when you have one pit inside a fruit and you separate them from each other, so what did you just do? You could look at it as I just took the good from the bad, or you could look at it as I just took the bad from the good. So Ben Ish Chai says the heter for that is that we look at it as you took, whenever you have two things that you're separating them from each other. It's not like few pits that you're taking out one by one. There's just one, and you take them and separate them from each other. That's considered good from bad, and therefore, when you're immediately eating it afterwards, that would be fine, right?
Like a date.
Like the dates, like any of those fruits that you have one pit inside.
Is that
You
even? Is
could
that,
also argue that's not even a mixture, right, Ralph? In that specific
Well,
example,
Watermelon dates.
right? You have
But
a date.
let me have everyone over here. So that's what the Mishnah Berurah later on in Siman Shin Chaf Aleph says. The reason, based on the Pri Megadim, is because that is not considered separation, because you're doing it b'shat achila mamash, is considered derech achila. So really what he brings over there is coming from this Biur Halacha, the machloket between Maharitat and Mahari Abulafia, right? Now the Ben Ish Chai again says that heter is because you have one garin only. We look at it as you're taking the good from the bad, right? Now, the difference would be if you have, let's say, raisins, right? The bigger raisins that you have a few pits inside, or the larger grapes, they have a few pits inside, and you want to feed it to your kid or whatnot, right? And you take every one of them, it's like 4 or 5 seeds inside, you want to take out, that's different, right? That would be different. Versus when you have only one, that would be mutar. Okay? So they have 3 different moving parts over here as heterim that Chacham Obadia uses, but we are now dealing with the first one, which the Mishnah Berurah brings in the name of Mahari Abulafia, and he brings that Maran Chida himself was machmir at the end of the day, because the majority of the poskim who do not mention anything for that, it indicates that they are machmir. Fine. Now, says the Mishnah Berurah, V'ra'iti b'sefer ma'amar Mordechai. He brings another, this is in the next Biur Halacha, the longest Biur Halacha of this siman. He brings a discussion, Ma'amar Mordechai again, another one of the Gedolei HaSfaradim. He writes, and I read to you the last 3 lines of Biur Halacha over here in the first column. Mikan nir'eh barur. From here you see clear. The ma'asheno agim b's'udot gedolot. What happens in large feasts and seudot that you have, parties that you have, Likroa dag migabo, they would cut up the top of the fish, and they would take the entire bone structure out from the top. It's cooked already, soft. You just pull it out, right? And basically fillet the fish like that, right? Is that mutar or is that asur? So is the Mamar Mordechai, right? Don't be rushed. Says the Mamar Mordechai. The yesh li zaher b'Shabbat milasot ken. On Shabbat you should not do that. De'evele borer psolet mitoch ochel dechayav afilu belalta. You will be chayav midoraita. So what should you do? Yaniach hashidra sham. Let the bone structure be there, and people will take around it, take the fish, the flesh out, and then you throw the bone afterwards. So what's the halacha? This is what the Ma'amar Mordechai says, and then the Chafetz Chaim says, well, I have got a serious issue over here, because I live in Radin. I know what people do in Radin, and in every other city of Ashkenazi countries that I've been around. Chafetz Chaim made a lot of travels to sell the Mishnah Berurah, right? It says the Chafetz Chaim, and I'm reading about 10 lines down now. Nobody is careful in this. The minhag is not like this. The minhag seems to be a full-fledged isur deoraita. How so? Says the Chafetz Chaim. Not only when you're eating that they're not careful. If you could keep around the table, please, Rabotai. If you want to talk, there are other places to go. Not only that, but even before eating, when they want to serve the food, they take the bones from the chickens. Imagine they're serving the food, they take all the bones, they put it on the serving platter and sending inside the party. That was the minhag. Says the Chafetz Chaim, how in the world would that become mutar? That should be like literally recipe for chiyuv deoraita. It's a very frustrating question he asks. That's the minhag. Mamar Mordechai is machmir, and the minhag is not only when you're eating it, which is the machloket Mari Tatz and Mari Abulafia, but they do it beforehand. So it says the Mishnah Berurah, there is mishum the kevan da atzamot va'basar hem bechibur echad. Now he brings this halakha that we mentioned, that when they are in one connection together, they're all one piece. Shayach beinyanenu mashevi Magen Avraham b'shem Yam Shel Shlomo. Magen Avraham brings this in the name of the Marshal Yam Shel Shlomo. When you have different nuts that you're eating, luzim botnim shenishtaberu, and they're still in their klipa. Because they grew together, they're considered one piece, one min, one type. So according to this, the fish and the bones is not a mixture. You know what I'm saying? The chicken and the bones is not a mixture. The melon and the seeds is not a mixture. They grow together. It's one thing. It's one mitziut. According to that would be mutar. Afhachanami tikon ochel be'almahu. I'm skipping it about 10 lines. Here also is considered a tikkun ochel. And en shem melacha alav. It's not considered a melacha at all. Because like you have an apple. And you want to cut a piece of apple. Is that borer? So this would be the same thing. You want to peel off an apple, peel off a cucumber. Mutar asur. Well, we said before, if you don't want it, according to this, it's one piece. And here is even better, because really that's considered also ochel. Most people eat the peel of an apple, a peel of a cucumber. Now, even though that you don't want it, still considered ochel, and according to this, for sure it's considered ochel. Based on this, You ready for this? The kula of the day. Harav says you could even use a peeler on Shabbat. Take a peeler, just peel it off nicely with a peeler, right? So says Rabbi Shaul. So says the Menucha Da'ava, Moshe Levi. So says Rish Mafliach. Or Mekel, Mikar Adin. Because not a kli, the peel is not a kli that's made for brera. This is ochel, one piece. Is not even a mixture in that way. Now the Mishnah Berurah, as we will see, he will. I'm out of time. The Mishnah Berurah, as we'll see, he is more mahmir on this, and we don't have time now to go through the whole Mishnah Berurah over here. But Harav will be more mekel. Now. Hayotze mikol hanal. I just want to read to you the maskana of the Biur Halacha in the minute and a half that we have left, and then we already mentioned what the Sfardi poskim say, but the Mishnah Berurah is machmir like this: the be'ed ha'achila kufa. As you're eating and you want to take these mekel vekolef ha'atzamot, if you are mekel and you pull out the atzamot as you're eating, bevadai lo nuchal limchot biyado. We can't yell at him, he says. And even if you're doing it before the meal starts, not as you're eating, ledat harema v'marshal derech ochel, who still is considered derech ochel im kavanato lochol habasar la'altar. If you're eating it right away, it's like on the onset of Suda, as you're eating. ויש לצרף גם כן דעת איזה מן הראשונים שהוא בברכי יוסף שסוברים דלאלתר מותר אפילו פסולת מתוך האוכל. There's other sirufim and shitot of rishonim to combine with this as well, that they hold that when you're eating la'altar, even psolet mitoch ha'ochel would be mutar, even though that we don't paskin like that. Aval letaken davar ze la'achar zeman, but to do it for later on, like the large seudot that you have to prepare hours before because there's so much food to be prepared and so on, that already would be asur, as we mentioned from Ma'amar Mordechai, right? But again, as we mentioned, there's more leniency to be had when you consider that there is the shita of the Ma'ari Abu Lafia that holds that you could pull it out even because this derech ochel, even if you have a mixture, there's the shita of the Rishonim that we'll discuss this at length maybe in the next year, that when you have one growth, one piece, that's not considered even ta'arovit, it's just one thing, it's not considered even a mixture, and perhaps those three serufim will be enough to be mekel, the maaseh, according to